Welcome back to the Let's Stay Together talk show. Now here is your host, Reverend Rick McCain and author Brenda McCain.
All right. Welcome back to Let's Stay Together show. I'm your host, Reverend Rick McCain, along with my baby, my girl, my boo, author Brenda McCain and Tracy Brown Howard. Hey, we seem like we've got our caller on the line. Hey, Brenda, would you introduce the caller for us, please?
Coming up next on Making Marriage Work, we have Ms. Barbara Peters, RNLPC, marriage and relationship counselor and author, joining us for how to handle a jealous spouse. This should be a very great topic.
All right. Hey, Barbara, how you doing?
I'm doing great this evening. How are you both?
We're doing great. Thank you very much for coming on the show. And so, Barbara, I'm going to let you know what I told Melanie came on the show. Once you come on the McCain train, you are part of the family. So I'm letting you know that now, right?
I love it.
Okay, so I'm going to be the jealous husband since I'm the only one. I'm the only male here. So we're talking about these relationship issues that people have, and jealousy always seems to, as they say, rear its ugly head. Barbara, how do you deal with that in a marriage situation where you have one spouse that seems to have that situation of jealousy always creeping up in everything that they do?
Good question. First, I want to go and talk about the difference between jealousy and envy, though.
Okay.
Because I think it can get confused.
Yes.
And envy usually, in my definition, is wanting what someone else has. Maybe, you want a bigger diamond ring or you want a bigger house or something like that. But jealousy has a different component to it, and it's fear. So usually the individual who's the jealous one fears that something or someone might be taken away. And I think that this could come from many different places in their life, possibly growing up in their home. Maybe they saw something like that in their family and their parents' relationships, possibly from a previous marriage or a previous relationship. So I just wanted to clear that up because I think that they often can get confused.
Okay, well, Ms. Barbara, what are some of the signs of a jealous spouse?
Oh, wow. There are many, and let's talk about the spouse that calls or in our day and age texts frequently his spouse when maybe they've gone to the grocery store, maybe they've gone shopping, wants to keep track of them. The spouse could have trouble with the other person having different friends, and especially of the opposite sex. Many women have male friends, and a spouse often feels threatened by that. Wanting them not to leave the house alone, wanting to be tagging along together all the time. Maybe they don't want them to be around other attractive people. Maybe they have another jealousy over their family members, because lots of times I hear that this one spouse is spending too much time with their mother or their family.
Wow.
And here's a big one, both of you, Brenda, and this one is what we experience today all the time, and it's social media. How many times are there jealous spouses of their other spouses' interest in social media? I don't want to name different social media, but I think we all know what we're talking about.
Yeah, we know.
And they want their passwords, and they want to see who they're talking to, and all of that. So then they can tell them what to wear. They can get very controlling of, let's say it's a woman, a man who's a jealous person, and his wife dresses up really nice one day, right? Mm-hmm. And the man could be jealous of that. These are all signs that you could be dealing with a jealous spouse, don't you think?
Yeah. Barbara, so I hear you what you're saying, and, you get that a lot where, a spouse being jealous. Have you found in your research and your writing that some of that jealousy can be hereditary, and that they've seen it in a family, or how does that happen with that individual? They grow up and they have this, what I would call a jealous gene in their system that sometimes a lot of men or a lot of women, when it happens, they don't even recognize that it's there.
Well, I like what you said, a jealous gene. I'm not too sure it's a gene, but I really do think that it's possible from their environment and what they see. You know, parents are the role model of their children. And so it's what they see. If they see that in their father and mother, it very easily can get to be what they feel is correct or is what they feel is right. And so I think maybe that's what you mean by a jealous gene.
Yes.
I'm not real sure we have a jealous gene,
I
but
mean genetically.
I get where you're going. Well, I get where you're going,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, it could have its roots back to there. It could have its roots to a marriage that ended up in a divorce, that there was mistrust and there was a lot of stuff going on. So it definitely has its roots somewhere. It doesn't just appear, like you said, it rears its ugly head, but it does rear its ugly head, but it comes from something. Everything comes from something. That's at least in my feeling.
Yeah.
So when the non-jealous spouse is always being accused of doing something to the person that's a jealous spouse, are there any ways that she or he could help that person, you know, like setting up boundaries or something, but to help the jealous spouse know that she's not doing anything or he's not doing anything?
Well, of course. The first thing I always talk about is information. Okay, I feel that the more information that one gives somebody, the more they are not afraid. The more they're not fearful. So we're talking about the non-jealous spouse now, right? Helping the jealous spouse. So the first thing would be to, of course, understand that some of this is normal. Not to look at it as pathological, maybe, at least, because it doesn't have to be pathological. And then to explore possibly the roots of this person's jealousy. Ask a lot of questions. I'm often called the question kid in my counseling because I ask so many questions, but I always say information is key.
Yes.
So we need to know things before we can move forward. So, you want to know what are the fears of this person. You want to be able to show open communication. Create an environment that's not fearful for the person to talk about these things. And then let's say that there was a wound or a bad experience. Allow for the spouse to heal that and to feel and to have some time from, let's say, a previous relationship that might have been filled with unfaithfulness. He has to grieve some of that, or he has to feel safe that now he has a person that he can share that with, and he doesn't have to feel that he is in the same boat like he was. Because a lot of times when there's a second marriage, they really feel that they can't do what they should be able to do because of an experience that happened before, so they sort of feel that they have to react the same way. You also want to create an atmosphere full of love and trust, so that the person is able to come forth and disclose. You don't disclose in an atmosphere that's fearful. And you want to embrace a healthy attachment. You want to look for ways to reassure your mate that you love them, that you are attached to them, and that you're there for them. So I think those are some ways that the other spouse can help the person through this.
Let me ask you this. So we're talking about the other person. How do we help the individual? Say I'm the jealous husband, and I don't care what my wife is trying to do to help me. I'm just not listening. I'm even the more that she tries to help me, I just get even more and more jealous or more angry and more frustrated. What can you do with your counseling and the books that you have? What do we do to maybe help that person see that they have a jealousy issue? I know with Alcohol Anonymous, they say the first step is that you've got to admit that you're an alcoholic. How do we help that spouse understand and admit that they are indeed the jealous individual?
Okay, so I was going to suggest a counseling session, so you already suggested that. That's very difficult because not everyone wants to have the finger pointed at them and say, look, you have this.
Right.
Like you hit the nail on the head when you talked about the alcoholic. They don't want to say they're an alcoholic, they'll be very happy to say they have a problem with alcohol, but they don't want to be called an alcoholic. So the other person is definitely not going to want to be called the jealous spouse. So when you're in a session trying to make the other person have responsibility and understand that he is not dealing with this in an appropriate, healthy manner. So you have to be very tactful, and you stay away from words that are labeling. That's definitely one way. And you also want to show, I always do anyway, that no problem in a relationship is one-sided. Even if the spouse is jealous, the other spouse does have a role in that. So you want to come at things in more of a combined, non-threatening manner and work it that way so you get some buy-in to what you're doing. I always have to get a buy-in before you can get anywhere. You have to have somebody trust you. You have to have somebody not feel threatened, not feel that you're pointing the finger at them, and I'm very tactful with that. Lots of times I'll role play something, and I'll, talk to the other spouse and say things that you want the spouse who is the jealous person to actually hear. So there are many, many ways to go about it, and I will tell you that each case is different, like with affairs, okay? I can have 6 couples come in with affairs or have had affairs, and every one of them will be different. And it's the same with jealousy because people are different. And you have to meet people where they are and find out, this is where I say I'm a detective a lot, you have to find out what makes them tick. What is it that you need to hone in on to know who you're dealing with, and then when you have some of that information, then you know where to go. So it's a process. It doesn't happen right away.
Amen.
But Barbara, when you have a jealous spouse, you see it, other people see it, but they don't see it. How, no matter what the non-jealous spouse is saying to accommodate, to help the relationship, that person don't see it at all. That could just be so detrimental and have them on a road to destroying their marriage. How can that non-spouse, non-jealous spouse not give up? She loved the person, but it's like, this is draining. Everything I do, you're saying, you're accusing me of something. How does that work out? Does that person need the counseling as well as the jealous spouse?
Well, you're talking about denial, correct?
I'm talking about, the jealous spouse is in denial of the fact that they're jealous.
Right.
But the non-jealous spouse is trying to explain to them that they're not doing anything, but it's just, since that person in denial that they're jealous, they don't see it, so it's a vicious cycle.
Right. Well, that's going to take time, and that's going to take a lot of role modeling on the non-jealous spouse of the appropriate behavior. As parents, we role model for our kids. Well, we have to role model for our spouses. They have to see the right way. Now, that's a slow process. Now, with a marriage, I believe that when you make the vow to stay in a marriage. That's what I'm all about. My gift of a lifetime, building a marriage that lasts, is all about that. So you don't think about bailing. You think about, okay, like you said, how can I help the spouse? But let me say something else. How can the person help themselves? With alcoholics, they have Al-Anon for the spouses of the alcoholics, which we all know about. So they have their own program. So let me talk about that. The spouse who's not the one that's the jealous spouse, is on the other end of all of that suffocation, manipulation, controlling, or whatever, has to think about what they need to do for themselves while the process is going on in the couples counseling and maybe in the individual counseling. Now, of course, a referral to individual counseling is made when necessary. Now, of course, that doesn't mean the person's going to go. So that's up to them. But in the meantime, we're talking about what does a non-jealous spouse do. They have to do their own program. They have to figure out a way to get some boundaries here. And now the boundaries, of course, have to be talked about. And the best way to get boundaries within a relationship is to have both people have an input. Because if one person's going to set up the boundaries, that's going to be lopsided right then and there.
Yeah.
So you want to have input from your spouse. You want to be very specific about, what is expected and what isn't expected. You want to make those really clear. Let's say, for instance, your spouse is jealous and doesn't like you hugging some friends, especially, let's say this is a male and it's a female that hugs male friends. Mm-hmm. So, you have to come up with, okay, if a real hug is not good, would a side hug be good? What about flirting? Maybe that's not okay. These things have to be talked about.
Right. And
they have to be defined so that you both know what you're talking about, because one person may define flirting one way and another person may define it another. And I find that with my couples, the definitions are really important, because many times they're not talking about the same thing, which is why I wrote he said, she said, I said. Mm-hmm. So you want to do that. You also want to, if you are going to try to set some boundaries, you really want to have them written, because it's easy to see, it's easy to go back to. And then the big thing is to commit to following them. That follow through is so important.
Yeah, it is.
And so setting boundaries, I'm sorry, did you want to say something?
Go ahead.
Setting boundaries is so important. I wrote a blog one time. We all know good fences make good neighbors. Well, I wrote a blog that good boundaries make good relationships. And that wasn't even talking about where we had a jealous spouse or anything like that.
But I do know, as far as when it comes to the non-jealous spouse, when you're saying setting boundaries and stuff, there are things that a person, you have to look within yourself and your own behavior and see, okay, what am I doing to make this person think that
exactly.
I'm doing something. And like you said with the flirtation, if you married the person, male or female, and they was flirtatious before you got married, that's their nature. But of course, when you get married to them and they still doing it, you're looking at them sideways. But when a non-jealous person really do need to examine themselves, not saying that you shouldn't be able to hug someone, because that's kind of, like you were just saying, should I hug them this way or that way, or just not at all? Or if you always think somebody's looking at someone, that's kind of like borderline insecurity with the jealousy, though. And that's just, to me, a concoction of something detrimental that it would mess up a relationship, no matter how hard the non-jealous person is trying to be right in the relationship.
Well, what you said about assessing what they're doing, what they might be doing wrong to perpetuate the spouse's jealousy is absolutely correct. They have to, but they also have to understand that they think differently than their spouse. So if they think they're doing something right or wrong, the spouse could have another thought about that. So they have to get the other perspective. So they might have to say to the spouse, is this possibly bothering you? Is that possibly bothering you, or whatever? Because you just can't decide that you're doing something wrong or right and then act on it when it may be incorrect towards your spouse. So once you arrive at that, let's say the non-jealous spouse is, well, maybe I am flirty. Maybe I do hug too many people, and then they can always stop that behavior for a while, okay? So then they'll show their spouse the commitment to the marriage and to making, life a little easier. And and also at the same time, they can be very demonstrative in their love towards the spouse. And another interesting thing about that is, when I say be demonstrative in loving their spouse, we have to go back to what's the spouse's love language. So you have to know what your spouse needs in his way of getting, or her way of getting love. Because if you do something that you think shows love, and it doesn't, you're only fooling yourself.
So, Barbara, let me ask you this question real quick. So,
yeah.
Have you, twofold questions. Have you ever had a situation, I'm sure it happens a lot, where this person that is the jealous spouse is typically not the person that comes to you for counseling? So how do you get that jealous spouse into the counseling to talk about the situation that they're going through?
Oh, great question. Okay, so usually when I have couples, I ask to see them together. But what you're saying is maybe one spouse is coming in and talking about their jealous spouse, correct?
Right.
Is that where you're going with that?
Well, that and the fact that that other person doesn't want to come in. So say Brenda comes in and I'm the jealous spouse and I'm causing her all these kind of issues and she's coming in to talk to you, but you want us both to come in together. How do you facilitate getting him in there? What's the the worm on the hook that brings them in?
Okay, and you don't want to come in. Got it.
Right.
Okay, so what I usually do in that situation is I usually talk to, let's say, Brenda, and I go, Brenda, it sounds like it'd be a great idea if your husband came in with you on this because clearly this is not just your issue. He's very integral in the part. And Brenda says, well, no, he says he's not coming. Counseling's not for him, all of that. I go, you know what? Why don't you tell him that whenever I see an individual, I usually like to see the spouse as well to get some more of an input and bring them in on an informational session. That usually works. Then when they come in, I have to be very tactful at having him have the buy-in to continue to come. So at that first session, let's say if he did come, all right, he agreed with that because he thinks he's doing it for Brenda, not for him or not for them. So that's okay. He's willing. He comes in, and then I, talk with him. And at that session, I don't come down on him. I don't point the finger at what we think is wrong with him. I let him talk about how he sees their relationship, and can he give me some information on Brenda that might be helpful since Brenda came in for counseling. And by the end of the session, I go, you know what, it would be really great if, you both came back. Now, I tell you, I usually have some luck with that. Sometimes I don't, but that's the way I go about that.
All right.
So you use the reverse
psychology. Does that sound like a plan?
Yeah, that does sound like a plan. Because I know, I've been doing counseling for like 20 some odd years myself, and I know sometimes it's very difficult to get people in together because, the person that wants the counseling, you'll typically have someone that doesn't. And just getting that person in and that moment that you get them in, you've got to do something that's going to bring them back. And they're already at a point where they are negative and they don't want to come, and just finding that way of relaxing them to a point where they're not being attacked and know that they're just sharing vital information to help the relationship does ease the process where that person will want to come back again and again and again.
Exactly. I've had several situations like that. I've been amazed because the wife would say, oh, he's never going to do this. He's never going to come back. And it happens. Now, I can't say it happens 100%, but it happens.
Yeah.
You have to provide a safe, non-judgmental setting, and you have to show that you're there just to get information and, see how he can help out or she can help out and, talk about their marriage. And I usually talk about what brought them together, and I usually bring up a very good thing I do with couples to get them to look at what's wonderful about their togetherness is I ask them what brought them together and what it was like when they first met and the wedding. And you when people start talking like that, usually when it's a good start, feelings start to come out a little bit, and it eases the setting from being negative or difficult to one where they walk out with a little better feeling.
Barbara, let's go back to how we started with the difference between being envious and having jealousy. A little scenario here. If one of the spouses, well, let's just say the woman is making more money than the husband, and the wife is making more money than the husband, and she's getting promotions and getting to do things, and the husband always seems like he's upset about all of the attention going to her. Is that a form of envious or the spouse being jealous?
I think that's jealous because I think that's a threat to the spouse.
Okay.
Excuse me?
With the wife making more money, seem like it's threatening him.
I think that's a threat to the male, right? But I also, there probably might be a little envy but I tend to look at it more as this threat because she's doing all of this, getting all this money. Boy, maybe someday she won't even need him. That could be a thought, Yeah, so that would be a threat of loss. And sure, I think maybe there's a little envy into it, because typically, and I know today in our society, it's not like it was years ago. Today you have women and men in high jobs, and you have two family, you're both working. But long ago, it was usually the male that was the provider. Today, we have a lot of women that are the provider. We have a lot of stay-at-home husbands. So I think that what your question, the answer is probably a combination of both, maybe a little higher on the jealousy end, but with a little envy in there as well.
Barbara, what I would basically say, and when people come up to that to me, I said, if my wife makes more money than me, I wouldn't be envious or jelly. I'd just be happy because that means that money is coming to the household. But we still live in a male-dominant society where we're told as men that you're supposed to be, bringing in more. And so a lot of times men get upset about the fact that their wives are bringing in more because it takes away that male figure in them. I don't know why, but that male-dominant figure is always sometimes attached to the money that they bring in. And if a wife is making substantially more than him, for some reason, they feel demasculated by the fact that that person is making more than them, and somehow that demasculation causes jealousy in a relationship, and unfortunately, that's something that shouldn't happen. Tell us a little bit about the book that you've written, and I think you've written more than one. Give us a little information about the books you've written.
I will. I just wanted to tell you what you just said is absolutely a great way to do it, because the male ego is more fragile than the female ego. Yes. So it can. But also, you said one thing really important. I just wanted to mention it.
Problem.
You talked about that you would be happy because the money would be coming into the household. Well, do you know you said the magic words? Because lots of times my couples don't have a we in their relationship. There is two I's. And everything is an I and an I, and there's not a we.
Right.
You perfectly said it with you would be happy because it would be coming into the household, the we. That was awesome. Thank you.
Hey, thank you.
Yeah, I've written a few books. The first one was The Gift of a Lifetime, Building a Marriage That Lasts. It was a very special book to me because I felt very strongly about the union of marriage and didn't like what I was seeing about how we have some revolving door marriages, a lot of them. And I wanted to put down what I thought would be the major components of a lifetime marriage. And I made it in an acronym called the FACTS. Now, fortunately, it fits because the FACTS stand for forgiveness, acceptance, compassion, trust, and spirituality. And I feel that those five are what a lifetime marriage should have.
Amen.
So I based it on that, and then I put some other ones in there. I called it the faith, and I added friendship, affection, intimacy, time, and happiness. But the first five are really what all successful marriages and marriages that are happily ever after probably do have. So I use some case scenarios in that. I have a couple of real, in some anecdotal stuff from clients. Of course, I changed their names that are in there.
Right.
And I also made the book so that it could be given as a gift from parents to their children as they, when they're getting married. And what's even, I feel, a very special part of the book is it can be given from a bride to a groom and a groom to a bride, because I have in it a place for each of them to write a love letter and to write their own wedding vow. So I love it.
That is the gift of a lifetime.
Yeah, that is a gift
I
of a
love
lifetime.
it.
Hey, Barbara, how can someone get in
in
contact with you if they're looking to get contact you for counseling, for information about your book? Give them that information for us.
Well, my website is barbarajpeters.com, and they can go there, and it has how to contact me for counseling. The books are all on Amazon.com, and so that's the easiest way. Of course, I do have a phone number, but it's all on my website as well. I work real hard on my website to make it user-friendly.
Yeah, and we'll definitely make sure we get people directing them to that as well. Hey, Barbara, we thank you for being on the show. You've got so much more information that you can share with us, so we definitely want you to come back on our show. Would you like to do that?
I would absolutely love it, and I hope that we can just talk about it and get something set up for every few months or whenever you have have a space for me, I'll be so happy to do it.
We'll definitely have a space for you because, like I said, you're family now. So, Barbara, thank you very much for sharing with that. And I'm going to try to be a better jealous husband just because I heard from you.
Okay.
Thank you very much for calling. Let's stay together talking. We'll talk to you real soon, okay?
Thanks, Barbara.
Bye-bye, Brenda.
Bye-bye.
That's some interesting information about it. I mean, she shared, that facts thing she said was pretty interesting. I know you wrote that down, but, one of the things that we really don't want to admit about as men is that men are more jealous. Men show more their jealousy than women. Women might be jealous, but they're like they hold it inside. Where men, they will show off their jealousy, and it's something that men have some issues with, and that a lot of times you can't get them to talk about some of the relationship issues that they go to because that jealousy is something they don't want people to see other than the person that they're with. And so we're going to go to commercial break here for a second. We'll be coming back. Thank you very much, Barbara, for calling in and talking to us. This is Reverend Rick McCain along with Brenda, Tracy, Dion. Let's Stay Together Talk, sponsored by PureFlix. We'll be right back after these commercial breaks.